presentation of HBO Sports.
The novel coronavirus continues to spread worldwide from its starting point in Wuhan, China. Now,
cases of COVID-19
milestone today, the most reported coronavirus deaths
country
in a
shutting
single day.
down, closing almost
Stunning
all
report just
businesses.
out. It shows a record-shattering 6.6 million Americans.
World's biggest
filed for
sporting
unemployment
contest
benefits.
canceled or
Tokyo
postponed.
2020 organizers and the International Olympic Committee
Prime
bowing
Minister
to
announced
global pressure.
2020 Summer Olympic Games will be postponed until summer 2021.
The summer of 2020 was supposed to be the summer of the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games. More than 15,000 athletes from over 200 countries coming together, all of them eager to realize the dreams they had chased since they were kids. The venues were built, the tickets were sold, the athletes were ready. And then, all of our lives were turned upside down, and the Olympics were postponed for the first time ever. Now, the Games getting delayed pales in comparison to the tragedies that COVID-19 would cause all over the world. But the impact wasn't just on people's physical health. It was also dangerous for our mental health. Fear, uncertainty, disruption, isolation. All of that was very real for millions of people. Mental health was something I'd been thinking about a lot, long before the virus hit. With the 2020 Games approaching, the first Olympics I wouldn't be a part of since I was 11 years old, I found myself looking back on the highs and lows and how close I came to losing it all. And then when the Games were postponed, what I thought about was the mental health of all the athletes who had worked so hard, and now had to pick up the pieces with everything changed. We should have all been watching the Olympics together in the summer of 2020. But instead, I'd like to tell you about our journeys to the dream, and how much more there can be to all of our stories, there and back.
You broke more than 25 national age group records. You got the World Championships coming up. What more do you want to accomplish?
One of my long-term goals is to win the gold medal in Athens and go on more than one event. So, I have a lot of goals, but I think that I just want to take day by day.
When you're an Olympian, you like to think that your story is different from all of the others. But really? They all pretty much start the same.
I want to go to the Olympics and win a gold medal in the team.
My goal is to go to the Olympics, be an Olympic team.
And the goal that I wanted to reach was to be at the Olympics and really compete with all the great skaters.
At some point or another, all of us get this idea in our heads. We can make it to the Olympics. And everything just goes from there.
I'd always watch the Olympics and my parents wow, this is the highest level there is. That's how my mom explained it to me. My parents, my mom and my dad had sat me down. They're like, it doesn't get any higher than this. That's the Olympics, that's it. These athletes work their entire lives for this moment, and that's why they go to the greatest lengths to try and win. I just remember being awestruck by that.
Growing up in a single-parent household and having the type of energy that I did, whether you call it ADHD, you call it, just raw energy that can't be tapped in any capacity. The only thing that my dad saw that could potentially redirect my energy into something positive was sport. And he was right.
Well, I was born and raised in Park City, Utah, pretty much the adventure town, USA. I started skiing when I was 2 years old, which was pretty awesome. I have pictures of it. I don't remember my first time skiing, but winter sports has always been kind of my thing.
I started skating when I was 8. We get on the ice, and I just kind of love it right away. I didn't perceive myself as being, like, amazingly talented, but I was aware that I was better than, like, some of the other kids. And it just really rapidly snowballed from there.
Is called a typical 15-year-old teenager by his coach, except for one small detail. Michael Phelps is one of the fastest swimmers in the world.
None of us had normal childhoods, per se.
26.00. Boy, that first lap was really good.
Nobody who is going to expend that kind of effort to achieve that kind of goal is going to be just like everybody else.
I certainly think this is just the beginning. He's certainly not as strong as he's going to get, and we have limited his training, so it's not even near where he's going to be.
Now, there are good sides to that, and there are bad sides to that. For me, I don't want to say I would have done anything differently if I could do it all over again. I was competitive, I was hungry, I loved it, I chose it. But the truth was that my focus got incredibly narrow and intense really quickly, which would have ramifications later in life.
Arms forward, good, forward.
Even if it wasn't possible to realize that at the time.
I don't think that's an excuse for not learning a skill. I didn't fucking say it was. Go ahead, put that on the movie. Go ahead. Put your attitude of excellence right on there.
1. You think and you operate as if everything revolves around this sole focus, and that sole focus is the Olympics. Everything else is secondary. So your relationships, your school, your family, your other friends, everything that's not catered to you performing at the highest level in sport, it's a non-starter conversation.
13-year-old Sasha Cameron.
For me, it wasn't a sacrifice. Everything else in life was an obstacle that I wanted to push aside. I didn't want to spend time with friends. I didn't want to go to school. I wanted to do everything I could to be the best skater I could.
It's more of like a lifestyle. That's how I lived. Any little step I could take, anything to get the edge or advantage over my competitors and to win, my world was based on that, for sure.
I went 5 or 6 years straight, 365 days a year. The difference between great and good, I think the greats do things when they don't always want to. I think that's what makes them great. I've looked up to Jordan forever. That guy probably didn't want to play basketball every day. He's the GOAT. Peyton, he didn't have to study film for thousands and thousands of hours. He did it because he wanted to be great.
Up, good.
When I graduated high school, I remember working out like crazy because I wanted to be an athlete. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, you work out so much. And I was like, it's nothing compared to the Olympians. When I first got into skeleton, I ended up on my own at 16, being offered a free place to live, food, and a potential scholarship for whatever school I could try to get to. It was not really a hard choice. Go to the Olympics or go to college. And I basically chose sport over academics. I started winning everything. It was addicting. It was fun. I just got sucked in.
I didn't develop outside interests. I had a very singular focus on my sport and on figure skating. It was like a compulsion. It was necessary.
Most of my career, I was driven purely by a fear of failure. So unlike a lot of athletes who are driven by, I want to win, I want to be the champion, I was driven purely that I felt that I was inadequate. I wasn't the best guy on the ice. I wasn't the guy who was the most talented genetically, physically gifted. I could probably say I was the hardest worker, and I did the most amount of time in the sport because of my obsession with it wasn't good enough. Every day wasn't good enough. For 15 years, I lived that life. It was like, I have to be here because there's someone else on the other side of the world who's younger than me, that's better than me, that's just overall is superior to me in every single capacity. So I have to find a way to win.
After all that time you put in, the early mornings, the countless laps in the pool, or around the track, or rink, or whatever, when you finally go to an Olympics, I think the only word that you can use to describe it is overwhelming. You've basically been training your whole life for this one moment. And you know it's not coming around again for another 4 years, if ever. That's absolutely all in your head. And then throw in the fact that it's all unfolding in front of the entire world. Like I said, overwhelming.
First Olympics, I was extremely nervous. It met my expectations in the fact that I knew it was the biggest stage that I would perform in my life. And just those overwhelming emotions and just completely was an amazing experience. You felt like everything was special and you're trying to take it all in. As a track and field athlete, I had no clue if I'd ever make another Olympic team. Most track and field athletes only make one team. So I just wanted to make the most of the experience.
My first Olympics, I was 19 and the #1 ranked skier in the world, and Sports Illustrated picked me to win the Olympic gold, and I was beyond nervous. I mean, it was paralyzing.
It's a whirlwind. It's nothing like any competition I'd ever been to before. It was inspiring. It was amazing to sit with all these other athletes around the world and like eat your breakfast. I mean, it was just like this glow, this sort of vibe while you were there.
It completely blew my mind. Flags from every country. There was so much excitement and buzz. It was on no other level that I can compare to anything in my life. You get on an Olympic venue bus, and you go to the arena to compete, and you have this kind of epiphany that when you get back on this bus again tonight, like your fate will have been sealed. Something will be written into history that can never be unwritten or rewritten. And it's just a bus ride, but it's like the enormity of it is huge.
That's all they've done for the past 10 years. And now for the next 40 seconds of our human lives, this moment will dictate whether they have a gold or not.
Phelps, the greatest of all time, iconic figure, writes his way into the history books yet again.
So then, it's over.
Steve Holcomb has raced for gold!
And however it ends,
there will be no medals of any color for Jeremy Bloom.
The bigger point is that it's over. Everything you've worked for in the rearview mirror. And reckoning with that is something that unites all Olympians, whether you ended up on top of the podium or in total disbelief.
I fell twice in the first 30 seconds of my long program. I was shell-shocked, I was devastated. I was just like stunned. And not only are you having all these feelings, but you are having all these feelings while the entire world is singularly focused on you. And you hear with every fall just the, or like just like the hush. You already have all those feelings, and then it's like the most dramatic sound effects that are laid down, the soundtrack to this like devastating 30 seconds of your life. This was my Olympics, you know. It was not the performance I wanted to give, but I ended up with a silver medal. It's very hard to know what you're capable of, and sometimes circumstances in life happen and you have to do the best you can, and sometimes timing sucks, right?
Unless you're an Olympic athlete, it's difficult to understand when you fail at the Olympics what a big deal that is. From an outside perspective, it could say, oh, big deal, you're an Olympian. Like, people have bigger problems. And that is true. But for Olympians, that's your life. That's really what defines you.
In that 2002 Olympic 500-meter final in men's long track, the difference between gold medal, recognized, celebrated, and fourth place is this difference. 4 guys just went by in that time frame. And you worked an entire lifetime for that. The difference is the guy who won, we celebrate, we look to, we love. The guy in fourth, you never hear from that person. He disappears, he dissipates, he becomes a civilian. It's gold, and then what?
So with all the hype surrounding Bodie Miller coming in here to possibly medal in all 5 events, he will not have a medal at all.
Mainstream media, especially in America, but really everywhere, they love that feeling of building somebody up because that gives them control over the situation. You know, they pump them up, pump up expectations, and then it's good news. It's good content if they can chop their legs out from under them and see a hero come crashing down. It's good for everybody's ego. Everybody likes to read about that stuff.
This just in, ladies and gentlemen, Bodie Miller has just tested negative for gold medals.
And then to build them back up, then you have this underdog, the hero reborn. There's just a lot of natural flow to that pattern.
Bodie Miller, everybody!
I've gone through it enough times to know what it looks like from the inside. In 05, when I won the overall, I was the golden boy, and even though I was rebellious and they knew my patterns, they knew all my stuff, it wasn't like I wasn't having fun or partying or going out. They sort of covered it up and made it so that they could refine the picture of the hero on the top, and then they were setting it up so that if I did well, they'd have something else in the Olympics, and instead I didn't do as well as I could have, and they cut the legs out.
Bodie Miller is 0 for 5.
Failing to do well in races always sucks. I mean, it was my life, and I had a huge opportunity there, and you know, that just is annoying from a personal standpoint. I think every athlete would relate to that.
I was running the best races of my life, the best times of my life, and I hit one hurdle, and it cost me the Olympic gold medal.
Lolo Jones has the lead, but she hit the hurdle. She hit hurdle number 9, the next to last hurdle. Lolo Jones hit the hurdle and did not get a medal.
In my life, I've probably hit a hurdle 3 times. I'm talking about training, races, practices, and now I'm known as a girl who hits hurdles.
She looked to have the gold in her pocket.
I got ripped across the media, like, oh, she had all these sponsors, how could she not medal? Like, she's such a freaking flop. It was so overwhelming, and I had no one to talk to. I would be washing dishes, like, months later, and I'd think about it. And I'd literally be frozen. Like, what could I have done differently? I'd be walking in the grocery store, days going fine, and then someone would come up to me, oh, I feel so bad for what happened.
It was painful to see my family's reaction to it, what they had to go through. I think that's what hurt the most, was seeing my image tarnished in their eyes, that I shouldn't be allowed back in the country, that I was, you know, the most disgraceful Olympic athlete ever in the history of the world. Your Q rating is where they tell 1,000 people your name. Do they recognize the name? Do they have a favorable or an unfavorable opinion of your brand or your name? My Q rating was lower than Mike Tyson, who had bit off Holyfield's ear, or O.J. Simpson, who at the time had double murder and ran.
Could you imagine? Like, let's say you get a divorce, and then everywhere you go in public, someone's like, oh, I feel so bad for you. I heard you got that divorce. Happened so many times. And I had no one to help me through that.
It's nice to get home. The celebration kind of continues. People are so happy, they're so proud. They show their support.
Fans lined York Road for hours, ready to get an up-close look at their hometown heroes.
He's adorable! Look at the face. I want to be just like him.
And then it kind of dies down. Then you basically get in that part where you're either like, am I gonna put myself through this for 4 more years? Or am I gonna find something else to do? And we're lost. I think that's where a lot of it really comes from, is we're just so lost, because we spent 4 years grinding for that one moment. And now we don't know what the hell to do. I think it's probably safe to say that a good 80%, maybe more, go through some kind of post-Olympic depression.
After the Olympics, the village doors close, and then that's kind of it. So all the media's gone, all the exposure's gone. Before the 2008 games, I remember one of the coaches specifically on the dive team, this was my first Olympic Games, something I dreamed of since I was 7 years old, and he had said, don't be surprised after the Olympics for the post-Olympic blues. I was 19, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm better than that happening.
After every Olympics, win or lose, I've felt like a dramatic emptiness. Just because your whole world is built around this one day, and you're putting so much on it, so much expectation and pressure and interviews and what am I gonna do next? And you're plotting out this course of your life. After every Olympics, there's this incredible crash. Nothing really matters as much anymore. Like, well, I guess I can stay up all night because we're not competing, you know, I guess I'll have an extra slice of cheesecake. I remember trying to compete after the Olympics, and it was awful. I had no motivation. Like, well, what does this matter? Like, what does this compare to the magnitude of what I just accomplished? Just like anybody, if you traveled the world with a bunch of friends, like leaving summer camp, whatever, you come home and you're like, wow. Now what? Like, it's just like quiet, and then you kind of feel like, well, what did I do wrong? Like, what happened? Is it like, where did everyone go? You know, like you're happy to be home, but it's just this like isolated, cut off feeling.
Why do you think so many of the athletes get depressed when they come home from the Olympics?
I think it's something that all human beings are susceptible to. And with athletes, it's even more so, I think, because we have such a great ability to hyper-focus. So if you are incentivized and you're focused on winning, or you're focused on being the best you can at this one thing, and you're putting all you have into that without any other balance, when that ends and then you're out of the fight or flight mode of like, I have to perform, get left wondering, like, what do you do with your energy? I feel like we forgot about how human Olympians are and the needs we need as human beings. It's not about winning, it's not about performance. Granted, that's all great, but what about our mental health? What about our families? What about our education? What about after sport? And when you spend all this time and it ends, it'd be really hard not to become depressed.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shaun White.
So many things change after an Olympics. And the better you do, the more famous you become, and the more your life changes.
Your two-time Olympian, Lolo Jones.
And look at me, beauty.
But even if you become one of the success stories, it all comes with a catch. Because if your whole life was about building up to one race, one performance, or one event, how does that sustain everything that comes afterwards? Sure, you can chase it again. Just go back to the grind for another 4 years. But ultimately, that doesn't sustain. And eventually, for me at least, there was one question that hit me like a ton of bricks. Who was I outside of the swimming pool?
We are Olympic athletes, and we're not really sure if we're anything else. I think the die-hard skating fans or Olympic fans will always recognize you if you walk down the street, you know, even if it's 10 years later, because you were such a big part of their life and they're such passionate Olympic fans. But I think for most of the public, you know, they've got very busy lives. They like tune in, they're excited, they cheer, and then they kind of forget, you know? I'd say one Olympic cycle out from your Olympics, you're pretty far removed.
I don't think a lot of athletes understand that there's always a whole line of people waiting to be the next one. You know, at the time they think they're irreplaceable, that they're breaking records, they're, you know, making all the money, they're getting praise from everybody. And then when they retire, they expect it to really be like the sport misses them and like, oh man, like there they go. And in reality, it's like, bye. And then there's like the new dude basically rolls in. I think that from an ego standpoint hurts a lot of athletes' feelings and hurts their emotional stability.
It's almost like a conveyor belt of athletes that like you're doing really well, they keep you healthy, but like when you're done, you're off the conveyor belt. Like they just have new athletes from every sport coming in all the time.
When you're a younger athlete, they love you. You're the new fresh face. They want to promote you. They want to put you out there. They want everybody to fall in love with you. But after you've been to a few Olympics, you know, you'll see it kind of weans out.
You are in the business of finding the latest and the greatest athletes, extracting the best performance out of them, and then going back to the trough to look for the latest and greatest athletes and doing it over again, time and time again.
It's so funny because the longer here, you're like, oh, that's my replacement. We got Sydney McLaughlin, 19 years old, marketable, social media's on fire. And Lolo, that's your exit. Please go right.
I think the system is set up for high turnover, one. And two, the manner in which the funds and services are distributed are incentivized.
Big drive. Nice.
So if you're a federation that can win medals, you get funding. If you're not, you get cut. Not just the federation's funding, but also the salaries and the coaching. So it's hard, I think, for those people then to see the athletes as individuals.
The reality of funding for athletes in this country might surprise you. Stipends for training are minimal. And so most Olympic hopefuls just try to stay afloat while chasing their dream. Like, for every athlete with a sponsor, there are hundreds who need to take a second job just to make ends meet while they train.
I grew up watching the '96 Atlanta Olympics, and I've watched the, gymnastics team, and you had the track and field athletes in all this glory. They're on every cover of every magazine, and you're thinking they're financially stable. They have to be, right? And then fast forward to my future, me trying to be an Olympic athlete, and I'm living off of $7,000 a year.
The whole thought that going to the Olympics, and especially if you win a medal, sets you up for life is such horseshit.
Even if you're in a marquee sport and you do so well, you have a limited window to capitalize on and to pay back training bills and, try to earn some money. But for most athletes, there's no money. There's no money at all.
Let's only talk about Olympic athletes from the United States. How many golds do you have? Because if you're silver, you're not making money. You're bronze, you're not making money. You didn't medal? I don't even know your name, pal. Go back to the end of the line, okay? Out of the gold medals, how many of those are actually being concentrated on by corporate America to be hired by speaking engagements or sponsorships? You got such a small amount of people who are actually making money, and that money-making opportunity has a life cycle.
Lettuce, tomato, jalapeno peppers. You gotta try it.
I would say on average, unless your family is funding you throughout this process, which many do, you are in debt every single year you compete, even with the amount that you make.
I'm in huge debt. In the last quad, I had to fund myself. I had a small stipend, but it's not sufficient, like $750 a month, $1250 a month.
I've had years where I can make a killing. And then I've had years where I mean, bobsled, my check was $725 for the whole season. Tell me how I live off of that. As an Olympic athlete, so I've been a hostess at a restaurant. I worked at Home Depot. I think it was the most shocking when I was working at the gym and I was making smoothies for people. And my track race played. And I'm literally making somebody a smoothie and they're like, is that you? Like, why are, they couldn't get it. Like, do you see like any football player go compete and then they're making smoothies for people at a gym for $7 an hour?
I'll say I've been extremely fortunate to have a lot of support, have a lot of sponsors. If you're on the national team for swimming, you get $1,700 a month. That's supposed to get you through training expenses, so travel, living expenses, eating, car, all of the stuff. It's hard. I mean, if that's the only thing that you have, it's almost impossible.
For me, I think I was most scared after this year and I didn't make the team and literally got an email saying my health insurance was gonna be cut a month later. And I was like, are you kidding me?
When your financial security is so closely linked to your success, the pressure to perform adds up. That pressure is just something else that can take a toll on your mental health.
The USA Bobsled and the US Olympic Committee came to me and was like, hey, look, you've never actually won any sort of medal in bobsledding yet. You're USA 1, you're our top driver. Going into this for next season, we really need you to do well. If not, like we just can't support you. All of a sudden now the entire weight of the program is on my shoulders. I better do well.
Katie Eulander from the United States, 24 years old, out of Breckenridge, Colorado, the
2008, when my father was diagnosed with cancer. And I went on tour, which for skeleton, when we go on tour, it's 6 months. You are on the road from October until April. My dad understood and he told me to go compete while he was sick. But I got these emails from my mom saying he was not doing well, like I needed to come home. I turned to my coach every time and I said, I think I might need to go home. And he said, we can't. And I said, why? And he goes, because you're the only one we have. We need you to get medals.
Here she comes, rocketing into 12.
So the first time I kind of didn't respond, but then when I got the second email from my mom saying he wasn't gonna make it, I asked again. And he gave me the same answer. And it's really difficult in that situation because I love the sport. My father understood, but I wanted to go home. And it was just becoming so difficult to try to convince myself and them that I wanted to go. But when he did pass away while I was competing. And I don't think that I ever got over that.
In my case, there were a lot of warning signs that I couldn't handle the changes in my life after my success at the Olympics. I definitely made some bad decisions.
Just a few months after winning Olympic gold, Michael Phelps was busted for drunk driving.
And then rock bottom came in 2014. And that put everything that had come before into perspective.
Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian of all time, has been arrested again for DUI.
I get pulled over, go home that night. I mean, I'm just a wreck. Just sitting there in that room, didn't leave, didn't drink water, didn't drink anything, didn't eat anything. Just sat in my room basically curled up and crying. I was like, well, this is everything coming to an end in front of my eyes. And that's why I was just like, why don't I just end it all? In the end, I was fortunate to have some great people around me and the resources to get real help. I checked into a treatment center, turned my cell phone off, and spent the next 45 days rebuilding myself from the ground up. And then when I came back and found myself in a much better place, there was this other realization too, that I wasn't the only Olympian who felt the way I did.
Post 2008, I was so broken down that I would be driving in my car and I would just be like, I just hope a truck hits me. I just hope like a truck hits me and wipes me out and they don't get hurt, but I do, like then I'm done. I just would want to be gone. I would fight suicidal thoughts. I would fight sitting in my car, just closing the garage doors with the car on.
Depression is once it kind of starts going, it just puts you into a spiral and you just start getting deeper and deeper into it and just end up doing crazy things.
I was like, what? What's the point, man? What's the point of going to the Olympic Games? What's the point of sacrificing and training all of these hours if this is what I have to show for it? At that point, I remember, like, how do I just make this painless, quick, and end my life? Came to a couple different plans, and I don't think I ever got to the point where I felt confident enough to act out a suicide, but like hanging myself, no. Shooting myself, no idea how to get a gun. And my best option was driving so fast, smoking myself on a telephone pole. I won't feel a thing, but it's gonna be easier for me to be done with this life.
May 2017 is when I really started thinking about like ending my life because it was almost unbearable. I had a good day if I got out of bed before 11 or noon. I washed my face, I brushed my hair, I brushed my teeth, and like I left my apartment. I was like, I don't know what's on the other side, but I think that that would probably be better than whatever I'm living right now. The only reason I didn't kill myself is because of my twin sister, Carly. There's no way that I would just leave her like that. I was stuck in that weird place between not necessarily wanting to die, but like I couldn't go on as I was going. Because I really just wanted to live again and like feel good things and like see the world again and like be involved in my life. It was like my life was a snow globe and I could look in and I could see everything that was happening, but I couldn't be involved in it. There's just like this wall separating me from the rest of the world.
I went downstairs. I just decided, you know what, this is time. I have an opportunity here. That's kind of the last thing I remember. What makes it scary is after the fact is you don't realize all the people that would have been crushed and devastated. I didn't tell anybody. In fact, even after we won the gold medal in Vancouver, I still didn't tell anybody. Nobody. That was a moment between me and God, or you know, just me in the bedroom, and that was it. It was nobody else would gonna know or find out ever. And it wasn't until I wrote my book that I decided people needed to know. And actually, one of the big motivations was a close friend of mine, an athlete, Jarrett Peterson, killed himself about the time I was writing my book, and that's what triggered it. It was kind of like, this is like an epidemic. It's not just him. There's a lot of people out there that are suffering through this.
I grew up with Speedy. Of course, he was on the aerials team, I was on the moguls team, and we were the young guys on the team. I looked at him like a carefree kid that had so much fun. He was always smiling, he was always happy.
Okay. And Speedy, how did you get that nickname?
That nickname started when I was 11 years old, when I went to my first camp. I had a checkered life jacket and a big racing helmet that I borrowed from my uncle.
Oh, okay.
And didn't really grasp the concept of waiting in line, and so I'd cut in front of all the other campers and get 5 jumps in the time they got 2.
Okay, so it wasn't a girlfriend?
No, luckily. She'd probably be an ex-girlfriend.
It wasn't until 2009 when we were in Lake Placid at the Olympic Training Center for a World Cup. And he said, hey, can I chat with you for a second? And I said, sure. And we went to the TV room. It was night, it was dark, there was no one around. And he said, you know, I want to open up to you for a second. And I said, sure, what's on your mind? He started crying. And he said, most days I don't want to be alive. And I didn't know anything about mental health at that point. I was so off guard, because I think of Speedy as somebody who's always been so happy and so successful, and I didn't know how to react. And I just said, Speedy, look at you. You're so incredibly successful. You're a good-looking kid. You have the wind behind your sails. Like, you know, what's going on? And, you know, he just really opened up to me, and I often think about that moment. I wish I could go back to it now, because I think I would have handled it a lot differently than I did.
He was horribly depressed. When he was young, he was sexually abused. His roommate took his life with a gun, and Jarrett was witness to that whole thing. And from there on, life was never the same. And that was 6 months before the Torino Olympics. I didn't want him to go. I begged him not to go, but he insisted. He was beside himself. He didn't know where to go, who to turn to. He lost his identity. He told me that he didn't think he was going to be able to hang on for very long, and to not be surprised.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
I'm at the parking lot at the top of the Lamb Canyon.
Okay, what's going on there?
I really killed myself, and I want police to come get the body.
You fall to your knees and your heart just shatters. I'm not angry at him for what he did. The pain becomes insurmountable. And the pain that he was having, I know because I saw it. Your spirit is crushed, and it truly was unbearable with him.
I couldn't help but feel a little bit responsible. I couldn't help but feel like, you know, what could I have done differently? Who could I have talked to? Who, you know, is there something I could have done more? That's something I struggle with.
You might be listening to all of us talk about our struggles and wonder, why don't you just get help? Well, there are a lot of reasons. And probably the biggest is connected to what got us to the top in the first place. Our conviction that we can make ourselves unbeatable if we just work at it. Our belief that there's no way we should ever need help. Our fear that we'll become weak if we show any vulnerability. The stigma of having mental health problems is a huge issue all across society. How tough the issues are to talk about, or even just acknowledge. And Olympians are definitely a group who want to keep their pain out of sight.
It's very, very simple. Athletes most likely don't get help for depression, or, you know, mental health issues because they can't even admit that it's an issue. That is so fundamentally at odds with being a competitor. This is war. It's a game of strategy. It's a game of maneuvering and posturing. You need to show the world that you are strong. You need to show all your competitors that you are strong. And so if you were to say like, oh, I have mental issues, like, that just cracks the facade of trying to show the world that you're impervious.
I was worried that people would see me as this fragile person, somebody they didn't want around, or like, hey, you can't rely on Holcomb because who knows what he's gonna think. He's thinking crazy stuff, or he's mentally not fit to be whatever. You don't want the stigma of that going around. And so I didn't tell anybody. I kept that to myself.
Athletes just don't talk about our weaknesses. We're tough. We will hide anything and especially if it's a team environment, because you don't want to let someone know what you're kind of going through.
The biggest thing that I struggled with is that from the outside, it's like, you got everything. Why aren't you happy all the time, 24/7?
So if I had blown out my knee, I know for a fact I would have had the top physical therapist, the top surgeon, orthopedic, absolutely whatever I needed fixing my knee. And I know that because I'd mentioned one time before to someone in the Federation, I'm actually really going through some really dark shit right now, and it's really interfering. They said, oh, well, you could look up a therapist in your area. Being an Olympian is advertised as this amazing thing, and they leave out all of the side effects. So let's say that you make it to the Olympics. Some side effects may include an eating disorder, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, almost like a disconnect from the real world. And then when all those side effects do happen, there's nothing in play to help you with those. They kind of advertise this keeping our athletes healthy and happy, and they really only deliver physically. Everything else is just kind of oh, not our problem.
I think I can honestly say now, sort of looking back throughout my career, I don't think anybody really cared to help us. I don't think anybody really jumped in to ask us if we were okay. As long as we were performing, I don't think anything else really mattered. It's pretty unfortunate to say, pretty sad to say.
I think the last thing on my mind was how can USA Diving and how can the Olympic Committee help me with this? They can help me with my mental preparation, and they've done a phenomenal job of how do I mentally stay strong in my sport, but not once have I gotten wisdom, how does David stay strong outside of my sport?
The problem is, without fully understanding who should be helping us, it's hard to seek out the right person. Because it seems like psychologists and sports psychologists, everyone wants to work with an Olympian and have, claim credit for your performance. But when it comes to serious family issues or mental health issues, it's almost non-existent.
I'm just really frustrated with the system, and I think as I am more on the tail end of my career, that's where it really becomes apparent.
This is it. I said it before, but you guys can say it. This is the last time. No matter how your career goes or how long it lasts, there's one inevitable end we all have in common: retirement. It's not really natural to retire when you're in your 20s or 30s, and when you've devoted your life to a pursuit of such a singular goal, and then leave it all behind. There's that giant question: now what? And even bigger, who am I? And the truth is, there aren't tons of programs in place to help athletes handle the emotions of that transition.
What is available to retired Olympic athletes post-career? I don't think there's any. If you're talking about third-party resources that I'm aware of, I don't think there's any. There's none that I've used. There's actually zero that I have used in 9.5 years I've been retired. There's no pension, there's no bonus, there's no stock option, there's no job opportunity, there's no more coach, there's no more training environment, there's no more equipment, there's no more monthly stipend, there's no more prize money, arguably there's no more sponsorship. Yeah, that's reality.
I'm really not aware of anything that exists for retired Olympians, but I really feel like the bulk of what the U.S. Olympic Committee does is to help fund hopefuls getting to their dream.
I will never regret competing for Team USA in this country. Absolutely not. I've helped promote the Olympic sports for 3 Olympics. I've given my blood, sweat, and tears. I've given my talent, and all I'm asking is that after it's all said and done, someone can help me mentally get through this.
Losing Speedy Peterson was a shock for the entire Olympic community, but it wasn't an isolated incident. Stephen Scherer, a sports shooter who represented the US in Beijing, had taken his own life less than a year before Speedy's death. Kelly Catlin won a silver medal in 2016 as a part of the US cycling team, and then took her own life in 2019. Later that same year, Jack Hatton, a Team USA judoka, took his life as well. Nobody was prepared for any of these tragedies, but the news that maybe hit the hardest came in May of 2017.
A shock in the world of sports tonight. The Olympic community and bobsled fans around the world are mourning the death of Stephen Holcomb. The Olympic champion was found in his room at Team USA's training center in Lake Placid, New York this weekend. The cause of his death remains unclear.
Stephen Holcomb was found in his room at the Olympic Training Center unresponsive by his best friend, Katie Eulander. Stephen was 37 years old.
I don't know what was worse. Finding him 2 days late. I just like, then realizing like, thinking he was asleep and then realizing there was nothing I could do. And then thinking back to the days that I should have broken into his room sooner. How did I not do something sooner? And every time like I would go to text him, he was my best friend, I would have like a panic attack because my mind would go straight back to that moment when I found him. And I would realize he was gone, and then I would start to wonder why.
What else has to happen for this to change? What else? I mean, we see like, do 5 other athletes have to take their lives in order to see change? Like, how far down the road are we gonna get before somebody actually stands up and says, we have to do something, and this is important?
I think there's no question that Olympic athletes need more support. You know, the solution to mental health issues, or really just general support, right now we're just starting to understand how critical that is.
I don't think that they're maliciously ignoring our well-being. I just don't know that if they realize it's like a full crisis yet. How many more dead Olympians do they need before they realize that there might be an epidemic here?
I recently requested help multiple times, and I didn't get it. And I can't figure out if it was because it would have taken me away from competing for them, or if it was just they don't have the resources or they don't know. But regardless, if you look at the process I had to go through, I have to tell my coach, or I have to tell SportsMed, I have to tell Sports Performance. Then they have to tell 2 more people over in Colorado Springs. And then they have to go through this thing to try to find someone, determine if it's valid, my request for help. I went through that process, and despite those 5 to 7 people knowing, I didn't get any help.
I think a lot of us could have had a story that ended like Steve Holcomb's did, because a lot of us struggle with so many of the same feelings. And I saw Steve maybe a week before. He just seemed so like everything was fine. And I think we all seem like something's fine until we get to that one breaking point where either we're fortunate enough for somebody to see us, or we're not lucky and we die.
Dealing with the incredible highs and lows of being an Olympian, the sacrifices and the challenges, and figuring out a transition from such a hyper-focused life All of it can be extremely hard, but there is a way forward. There are people and places that can help, and there are outcomes that can be really successful. We just have to change the perception that problems with mental health are something to hide. And in a world where Olympians are leading the way forward to break down that stigma, the impact could be massive.
Where a better place to make change than on the Olympic stage? Youth around the world watch and look up to these people. And if we can take a stand and make change, it could affect the world in recognizing what truly matters.
It doesn't matter if you're an Olympic gold medalist and you are the most decorated athlete of human history, or you're someone driving a bus, you're prone to depression. My faith was how I was able to handle it and still handle it, but that's okay to handle it differently.
When stuff started getting bad, if I had just even seen someone like once or twice a week, we probably wouldn't have ended up where I did.
We're human. I don't think I have to say anything else. We're human beings just like everybody else. Yeah, I had won a shit ton of medals. I had a great career. Doesn't matter. I wasn't happy with who I was. I thought of myself of just a swimmer and not a human being, not a person. No self-love, no self-confidence. You know, thinking about committing suicide and not being alive anymore, you know, I think back to it now still. It's crazy what's been able to happen and what I've been able to learn.
It's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to kind of like talk to people about it. You got to definitely find the right people in your life that you can talk to about these things.
What makes the Olympics so special is their power to bring the world together. Like everyone else, I can't wait to live in a world where that's possible again. And my hope is when that happens, the athletes in the center of it all are not just ready to compete, but also supported through whatever may come once the flame goes out. My own mental health continues to be a challenge that I need to address on a daily basis. It's a part of my life, as much as being a husband and a father. It took me a long time to be okay with saying that, and I'm ready to spend as much time as I have to in the years ahead to make sure others know that there's help out there, and that it's okay to not be okay.
This has been a presentation of HBO Sports.